like you needed another clip about these two. Yeah, I was wondering whether I should contribute to the tons of videos that are out there without doing it in a way that it seems like I'm predatorial. I do think that you guys need to hear the astrological interpretation of what is going on between the two of them. We have so much to unpack. In this clip, I'm going to be talking about the birth chart of Johnny Depp, the birth chart of Amber Heard. I'm also going to be taking a sneak peek into the birth chart of Vanessa Paradis, because one of you lovely crew members, Nilufer, gave me a phenomenal insight regarding how what is happening to Johnny at the moment could be an extension of the karma of what has happened between him and Vanessa. I do need to tell you right off the bat, I'm not a particular big fan of Johnny Depp. I'm not some sort of apologist for Amber Heard. I am an astrologer. I like to look at planetary transits. I love to explore the birth charts of individuals. I think that this trial is deeply sad. I think that what is happening to both of them is touching upon a lot of karmic, deeply wounded issues. And I am not one to make fun of either Amber or Johnny, although sometimes I do need to say that some of the TikToks that are out there are incredibly funny. But I want to give you guys the spiritual analysis and the astrological interpretation of the Depp and Heard defamation trial, and I'm going to try to be as non-partisan as I can. We are also going to discuss the date of the trial, which coincided with the gorgeous conjunction between Jupiter and Neptune, thereby adding another beautiful layer of healing, forgiveness, and letting go to this crazy love story. I'm Lexi, your local light worker. I'm a tarot reader and an astrologer. Happy new moon in Gemini, and what a coincidence, because we are going to be discussing about the birth chart of another famous sun in Gemini, the actor Johnny Depp. I mean, if you've been plugged into the laptop just like I have been in the past 6 weeks watching this trial, I think you picked up on a number of fascinating but also kind of shocking details. I found out that Johnny is not able to see from his left eye. We all know that Amber is apparently into scatology. Furthermore, I had no idea that Johnny is actually such good friends with Paul Bettany and that they consumed a lot of drugs together. I mean, the sheer descriptions of the drugs used and the penthouses and the Bahamas, it's like it took this story to a whole new level of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Another interesting detail is that, again, I had no idea that Johnny Depp and Ellen Barkin had a brief sexual relationship in the 90s. But aside from all of this cancan, I do want to focus on the more spiritual aspects of what is going on between Amber and Johnny, because they are undergoing at the moment some pretty significant transits that obviously are throwing their lives into a bit of a mess. But what we see from the outside as a crazy mess, internally for them, is actually leading them to something much more spiritual and much more on the path of self-development. It's breaking down their ego to a large extent. Let's get into it. The first significant thing I need to mention is that if you have a look at the chart on the day when the trial began, 11th of April, you will see that there is an excessive number of planets in Aries and Pisces. We have here Venus in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces, Jupiter in Pisces. Taken together, all of these three planets are actually speaking about unconditional love and dissolving personal boundaries. These three planets are all about forgiveness and also the difficult act of letting somebody that you love go, which were pretty much the themes of this trial. We had a couple of times repeated this line, I just want to let you go, why can't you let me go? I want to go away. There is this theme of dissolution taking place between Amber and Johnny, which I think culminated this year in 2022 after a build-up that began with the two of them meeting close to when Pluto entered the sign of Capricorn. And I'll talk about the significance of this transit when I look at Johnny's chart in a second. But ever since Pluto entered Capricorn, a number of events happened between the two of them that culminated with this gorgeous energy that Pisces brought in to wash them away, to wash all the pain, to bring everything up to the surface so that the collective can witness their drama, their pain, their wounding, and then to finally release it, to bring some sort of closure. And then, as you can see on the day of the trial, we also have the Sun in Aries and Moon in Leo. This talks about passion, heart energy. Moon in Leo is all about the heart. It's a lot about coming to your truth. And the Sun in Aries is the pioneer. This is about beginning a new cycle. And we see that the Sun was also conjunct Mercury. And coincidentally, both of these planets are actually similar to Amber Heard's North Node, which I'll discuss in a second. But I just wanted to give you a brief overview of the chart of the day when the trial began, which featured the great conjunction between Jupiter and Neptune, which was a very significant event that basically kind of underlines the energy of 2022. And it's significant as well that as these two guys were battling each other in court, or beginning to battle in court, places in the world like the cities of Mariupol or the region of Bucha around Kiev were completely obliterated by the Russian army. So just as some sort of counterpoint in terms of what took our attention during this period, I just felt the need to emphasize that in some cases this energy of Jupiter conjunct Neptune can talk about mass pain and sadness, but it can also be shown, as in the case of this trial, as letting go, forgiveness, and coming to a final emotional closure in what has been a pretty tempestuous love affair. Okay, so let's begin with Johnny's chart. Let's have a look at some of the placements that I doodled here on his chart. I took a lot of notes. I hope you guys can actually see some things. So I'm just going to break it down for you. You can see very clearly that he is a Sun in Gemini in the 11th house. You can also see that he is an ascendant in Leo, so quite proud and charismatic, very luminous. And you see as well there is a stellium of planets in his 2nd house, right on the border between his 1st and his 2nd house. But actually, if you take a very good attentive look, Johnny has Uranus, Mars, and Pluto in his 2nd house in Virgo, a really powerful marker that keeps his masculinity, because in a man's chart, his Sun is significant to an understanding of who he is and what he identifies as, but Mars is the planet that you need to look at when you look at the chart of a man that self-identifies as a man and heterosexual. It's usually the energy of Mars that tells us what kind of masculinity he portrays, what kind of masculinity he's comfortable with. And paradoxically, Johnny has Mars in the sign of Virgo, the virginal maiden, the service-oriented energy. And you see how his Mars is flanked by Uranus, the planet of spontaneity and random bursts of energy and frenetic kind of inner anxiety. And also we have Pluto, which is the planet of stealth activities, building things up, allowing things to build up until a moment when there can be some sort of explosion happening. So I do need to mention that in spite of the fact that what I'm about to say about him is mostly positive, because I do side with him in this case, having witnessed the trial and having seen the blatant lies that Amber has exposed for the collective, I do side with him and I would like to see him win. But I do need to tell you guys as well, there is an explosive side to Johnny as well. He's not all milk and cookies and Captain Jack Sparrow helping kids in hospitals. There are some issues here within himself that got him to manifest a woman like Amber in the first place, and it was also brought about by the significant transit of Pluto and Capricorn going across his moon. There are a number of theories which I'm going to get to in a second as to what does Amber represent on a spiritual level in Johnny's life. The tumult that exists within him was manifested in a partner like Amber. It wasn't just that, oh, he's a poor victim of circumstances, he's incredibly kind-hearted, and she's the mean one. Try not to see people as good or bad, all good or all bad, because this is a pretty dichotomized way of thinking that is not helping us understand how birth charts work and what is the nature of a spiritual transit. Now, coming back to his placements, you can also see here that Johnny has Neptune and Scorpio in the 4th house, conjunct Lilith. So this talks Lilith, wild feminine archetype, the asteroid, conjunct Neptune. Neptune talks about an environment in the home, because the home is the 4th house, that was swaddled in secrets, that had a very strong but wild and untamed feminine energy, his mother, that could emotionally get things very messy. As you heard about the abuse that happened, that he kept quite secret for a long period of years. Neptune and Scorpio, secrets in the home, an environment that can be quite emotionally intense, but also an environment that he might have low-key idealized, because Neptune in any position in your chart gets you to see things through a rosy-colored glasses, or if you are quite aware of what is happening, there is a lot of disappointment, sadness, and needing to let go, like a painful letting go that needs to happen there. So for Johnny, the habit of going back home and relaxing by drinking or by ingesting drugs in order to escape, in order to forget, formed himself very early on in that secretive, wildly untamed, ruled by this darkly feminine energy that he described as well in the trial. I hope this makes sense. Moving on now to his moon in Capricorn in the 6th house. Well, we can see very clearly here that Johnny is an individual that is emotionally attached to being of service to other people. So yes, indeed, this is a polite, considerate guy. This is a guy that's very stable and loyal and pragmatic, because we saw the stellium that he has in Virgo in the 2nd house. But we also see here another marker that for him, work is the most important aspect in his life. Not only that, but he has his moon conjunct the south node in Capricorn. So this talks about an individual that comes from a past life with a lot of past life knowledge about the male relationships that he has, the relationships with elder people that can train him and teach him, and especially these could be males, because Capricorn usually represents maturity, older people, and it usually stands for fatherly like men. So we see that he is emotionally attached to members of the same sex as he is, being a man. We see that he's service oriented. We see that his heart is actually in his work projects, not necessarily at home. When you have a south node in Capricorn, you automatically have a north node in Cancer. And this north node in Cancer lies for Johnny in his 12th house. The 12th house is the house of learning to rest, letting things go, forgiving, letting go of control. And I see very clearly here that since Johnny has a moon in Capricorn conjunct the south node, control is his comfort zone, needing to know exactly where he stands. So I actually believe accounts of him being quite controlling and needing to know where Amber was, accounts that say that he can get quite jealous. If you look at his Mars conjunct Pluto in Virgo, there are significant markers in his chart that show that Johnny can get quite possessive. He can get quite controlling. In addition, when you have so much earth energy, this speaks about a very traditional type of individual, an individual that might have preferred for him to remain the breadwinner, the provider, and for his wife to be the goddess barefoot in the kitchen, pregnant with his baby, waiting for him, making him food, and being like the ultimate 1950s housewife. Yes, there is a lot of traditional energy here. That's why to me, it seems a little bit strange that he selected Amber out of all of the women that he could have had, when Amber carries this energy of a little bit of a rebellious, kind of like 21st century woman. She's also like self-proclaimed to be a bisexual. She was into gender equality and gender rights, you know, and it's a bit strange that you see here a pairing between an individual that kind of wants to fashion herself as being progressive and edgy and hip and cool, and an individual that is actually, in spite of the way he adorns himself, he comes across as a pretty eclectic Gemini Sun, and with his Leo ascendant, he kind of radiates this charm and confidence. But at his core, Johnny is deeply, deeply traditional, almost like an individual that you would see in a Mad Men episode. Now, the fact that he has this traditional energy is further underlined by his Saturn in Aquarius in the 7th house. So there are a couple of things to discuss here. Saturn in Aquarius talks about an inability to communicate in a group. Johnny was born into a family where every time when he tried to speak or every time when he tried to express himself, he got slapped or ridiculed by his mother. We know this from the trial. We know this from the accounts of him on the internet. We know of the fact that he used to wear an eye patch when he was a kid to correct his lazy eye, and his mother made fun of him. This kind of group bullying that he experienced at home in the family talks very deeply about the Saturn in Aquarius. It's almost kind of a limiting circumstance that comes from a group of people that you hold very close to you. And this can be a group of coworkers, this can be the family that he has created, and this can be the family that he was born into. Basically, whenever Johnny is part of a group, he doesn't feel comfortable. This is a situation that will constantly give him a sense of anxiety. And you see him at conferences or you see him in public places. This is a guy that doesn't look relaxed. He looks always a little bit edgy, or if he fidgets, he moves around, he makes a joke, he talks, he cracks another joke. It's because of needing to overcome this sense of deep anxiety and feeling as if he doesn't fit in. Saturn in Aquarius is the quintessential misfit, the rebel, the what am I doing here? I feel like I'm the black sheep of the family. So this energy was strongly emphasized from him from birth in his family, and then he took it out into the world in the collective, where I feel that it was very hard for him to learn how to express his ideas and thoughts without feeling like there is some sort of punishment or some sort of karmic retribution coming across him. So even though he managed to create a really beautiful family with Vanessa and he had 2 great kids, I do think that for Johnny, his role as a father never felt comfortable. He never felt comfortable being at home. It is more likely that he felt comfortable going to work, Moon in Capricorn in the 6th, being the provider. So he had the sense of, I need to earn money, I need to make sure that my family has all the daily duties provided for. But if we have a look at his North Node in Cancer, Cancer talks about emotions, and it also talks about becoming a parent. His growth zone is identifying with the role of the parent and not the role of the provider. So he feels more comfortable being the provider, being away from home, earning money. He struggles a little bit in groups. He constantly gets some sort of criticism when he finds himself in a group-like situation, and I think that he finds it very hard to defend himself verbally. He might stutter, or his voice might tremble because of the Saturn blocking the communicative energy of Aquarius. And actually what he needs to do, what he needs to grow towards in this lifetime is relaxing by spending a lot of time on his own, going on faraway trips, escaping in moments of solitude, and also engaging a lot with the spiritual nature of things, maybe praying, maybe visiting temples, maybe spending a lot of time in meditation. These are all things that Johnny needs to learn to start doing in order to fulfill his North Node in Cancer. Another beautiful way in which he can actually pragmatically adopt that North Node in Cancer energy is to become a really involved, hands-on, constantly present parent to his children, but they are all grown up. So I think that Johnny could get a beautiful second chance now that he finds himself at his second Saturn return to maybe become a really involved grandparent. This would actually be something so beautiful for him after he suffered so much in personal connections, to feel as if he can be understood by a group of children, by the group of the next generation, that he can impart some wisdom towards without feeling so criticized and so restrained all of the time. As we move up the wheel of Johnny's chart, we see as well Jupiter in Aries in the 9th house, and this is beautiful. Wherever we have Jupiter in our chart, that's where we are constantly blessed, that's where we receive constant support. Again, this is a marker that shows me that Johnny is not a stay-at-home person. He enjoys traveling, and especially travel by boats, travels on islands. No wonder that he actually has his own island. Jupiter in the 9th shows success with studying, so actually studying towards a higher degree would have made Johnny very happy if he only had time to invest in something of this nature. The 9th house also shows freedom, so he feels happy feeling free, feeling like this value in his life is somehow protected, like he has room to move around, to come as he wants and to go as he pleases. The ninth house also shows support from international people, and you see at the moment how many people from a variety of different places in the world are sending him support and encouragement. This is also particularly fascinating because Johnny is experiencing not only his Saturn in Aquarius return, but he's also experiencing his Jupiter in Aries return. At the moment, at the time at which I'm filming this on a new moon in Gemini sky, Jupiter is in Aries and Saturn is in Aquarius, and both of these planets have returned to the point where they initially were when Johnny was born in 1963. So we see very beautifully here how the collective, especially international people, through the help of the internet, he is the Sun in Gemini in the 11th house, so he revitalizes the online environment, because the 11th house, much like the world card in the tarot, represents the internet as well. It represents a space where we can come together with groups of people and we can actually exchange knowledge. It represents the academic environment, scientific groups as well, online forums, basically groups of people that work towards a specific mission together. So the Sun in Gemini in the 11th brings out this luminous nature of his. He magnetizes people through the internet. He gets support from his Jupiter in Aries returning in the 9th house from international people that want to see him experience a sense of justice and fairness. Jupiter on a very high vibration also talks about being liberated from that which has harmed you, because Jupiter is the Dharma bringer, while Saturn in Aquarius is bringing his karma. Having a look at his chart and Vanessa Paradis' chart, it feels as if they were much better suited, him and Vanessa. But usually an individual that has Saturn in the 7th house, instead of actually prioritizing people that might be good for them, they go for individuals that can bring them a lot of pain, and that is the karma that they need to pay back. So typically a Saturn in the 7th house, much like a moon conjunct Saturn or a Venus conjunct Saturn individual, and interestingly enough, as a side note, Elon Musk has Venus conjunct Saturn, which is again mind-blowing, because he too is drawn towards a woman like Amber that brings him a lot of pain or frustration. So there is something here about trying to be stoic in personal connections with individuals that are not really worth his time. This we can see in Johnny's chart, and I can talk about Elon Musk's chart in another video. But coming back to Johnny, so as not to confuse you, Johnny has a tendency to go for people that are not good for them, to spend time with individuals that I wouldn't really call them sycophants, but they can reach that level. So people that can be quite toxic, nasty, low quality, while other individuals that are more high value, he might feel a certain pressure being around them. He might feel like he needs to put a lot of effort in that connection. So to a large extent, I feel that what has happened between him and Vanessa is that he had a partner that was meant for him, that was super good for him. If you have a look at their chart as well, his moon is in Capricorn, her sun is in Capricorn. This is the quintessential let's get married energy. And they have a number of other really beautiful placements. For example, her moon in Cancer is conjunct his North Node in Cancer, which shows me that the way in which she loves and the way in which she is like a mother when they relaxed together, when they were at home together, that's exactly what his soul needed to learn and to grow and to develop. And you see, if you have a look at the pictures of Johnny and Vanessa in the public world, you see how in tune they are with each other, how relaxed he seems when he has her around, how close they usually were, which shows a deep sign of intimacy and trust between the two of them, compared to when he is out in the public with Amber, which shows that she seemed to be goofing around or pretending like she's super happy, and he seems very tense and crisp and a little bit dark and intense. So you see here the difference between marrying a woman that is pretty terrible for you and a pretty terrible choice as a life partner, and not marrying a woman that has given you 2 children and is basically astrologically designed to be your counterpart. This is the typical mistake that some people that have Saturn in the 7th house make. So indeed, I would agree with Nilufer that it could be that amberheard is the karmic payback that Johnny needed to have incorporated in his spiritual journey in order to somehow atone for the way in which he treated Vanessa. Interestingly enough, he was still together with Vanessa when he met Amber in 2009. So he might have had some sort of adulterous affair with Amber that led to the dissolution of his relationship with Vanessa. And part of this could also be why Johnny left Vanessa such an excellent parting gift, a beautiful mansion. So you can imagine that there is a certain degree of guilt involved in giving your ex-partner a beautiful parting gift that actually entails property. But another interpretation I had regarding this specific aspect is that we could see Amber as his karma, but we could also see as his Pluto healing moment. The really interesting timeline of their relationship coincides with the transit of Pluto in the sign of Capricorn and crossing over Johnny's 6th house. Before Johnny had this transit, he seemed pretty okay. He seemed pretty healthy. He seemed pretty balanced physically. He seemed to be quite, top notch. He was earning a lot of money. He had this partnership with Vanessa. He had 2 children. Things were relatively okay. However, as soon as Pluto entered in 2008 in the sign of Capricorn and crossed from the 5th house, the house of children, into the 6th house, the house of work, daily duties, everyday affairs, also the house of moods, emotional ups and downs, and needing to take care of your health and well-being, a number of aspects started breaking down in Johnny's life. We see the transformation of his body and of his aura due to the fact that he was ingesting so many opioids and consuming so much alcohol. He sadly also lost his mother right at the moment when Pluto was closely conjunct the moon. We also see that he fell in love with a woman that is quite hard to hold close or is quite hard to tame in some way, which talks about the fact that whenever we have a specific Pluto transit, this can also manifest as we meet a person that is very plutonic, a person that holds this witchy, dark sexual power over us. And the whole transit could be about how do we regain our own power to finally be able to stand up in front of this individual and say no more or enough. But in order for us to be able to survive a Pluto transit with grace and with dignity, we need to reach a point when we have been broken down so badly that we just need to say, I love myself. I'm not going to kill myself. I'm not going to destroy anybody else. I am going to get justice. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to push back this energy that's coming my way. And that's exactly what Johnny is doing in 2022. He's pushing back. And look how beautifully this transit is close to wrapping up right now. Pluto is at the 27th degree when the trial began. It's the final degrees. It only has 28 and 29 to wrap everything up before it enters Aquarius and before it will completely change Johnny's 7th house where he has Saturn. So a couple of rough years might be well ahead of Johnny. I'm not going to say that this will be an easy conclusion or an easy verdict. The verdict is pending at the time when I'm filming this reading, but I think it might be in his favor, although the proceedings and the basically settlements could take a couple of years to kind of pan out. So I do feel that he might get his justice. I feel that this is the end of a very difficult Pluto transit across his moon, which involved bringing up unhealed aspects from his childhood. Everything that was unhealed in relation to his mother was mirrored in his interactions with Amber. So a lot of the things that happened between the two of them were also pinging back on his painful childhood. This is why I don't think that it's a coincidence that Amber is American, Amber is blonde, and Amber has an explosive temperament. All of the 3 characteristics that his mother had. In addition to this, I would speculate as well that Amber is a Taurus sun, just like his mother might very well be. I did some digging and I tried to find out when Betty Sue was born, and unfortunately I could only find out that she was born on May 1935. I could only speculate that if she's born at the beginning of May, she might be a Taurus sun. If she's born towards the end of the May, she might be a Gemini sun. But it's interesting because Johnny is a Gemini sun, Amber is a Taurus sun. His mother could have been any of these two signs that basically represent the energy of the relationship that he had with Amber. The final thing I want to talk to you about in Johnny's chart is the fact that you can see in his 10th house, right on top of his birth chart, you see Venus perfectly conjunct Mercury in the sign of Taurus and close to the midheaven. So Johnny is this kind of individual that has a very intelligent, considerate, and beautiful public image. People tend to be drawn towards him, and he will leave behind a body of work that is artistic, creative, and entertaining. When you have Venus conjunct Mercury in the house of your legacy and your career, the 10th house, the most visible house in the zodiac after the ascendant and the first house, then you basically have an individual that has a very likable public image. And again, this shows me that Johnny is this individual that really prefers the world of public, in spite of the fact that his Saturn in Aquarius could give him a bit of a hard time in social groups. He likes being in touch with the public. He likes his fans. He loves to be cheered on. He loves to be applauded. He loves to receive awards and recognitions. In addition to this, Venus in Taurus talks about wealth creation, and it's a very fertile placement because it talks about a person that is able to acquire a lot of money, a lot of resources through long-lasting personal connections. And if you have a look at the bodyguards, the lawyers, the doctors that actually came up to defend Johnny, these are people that he's been knowing for a number of years, 10 years, almost 20 years in some cases. So he has this ability to create a very endearing public image. He has these long-term connections that he finds it very hard to cut away from his life. This is a person that really likes to maintain the people that he knows in his life, and he likes stability. Again, Venus in Taurus talks about a very traditional individual, an individual that loves beauty, loves food, loves the way things smell and taste, and the way things look. So no wonder that he fell for Amber, because you can say everything you want about her, but she is very beautiful, even if she is the kind of enhanced beauty that has been created following a couple of plastic surgeries. But she is quite attractive. Not only that, but Venus in a man's chart in the sign where the woman has her sun shows a really fatal attraction. It's an individual that cannot help himself. He needs to be with this specific kind of woman. And for a refresher, feel free to watch my video where I discuss about the moon and Venus aspects in a man's chart and how they represent the wife or the mistress. Well, in this case, Johnny actually married the mistress aspect because he felt so attracted to her beauty that it seems like he was blindsided to all the other energies in her chart. Let's get into her chart. It's amberheard's chart, and I think the first thing you notice is that we have no details regarding her ascendant. I looked for it, guys. Please let me know down in the comments if you managed to do some digging up in the dark corners of the internet and found out her ascendant. It would make me very happy, but from the searches that I was able to retrieve, I couldn't find her ascendant. We see very clearly nonetheless that she is a sun in Taurus, and she also has a moon in Libra. So these would be her big 2 descriptors rather than her big 3, because we are missing the ascendant. A really important thing that stands out is if we take her chart from the position of her sun, you can see that she has the sun very close to the north node. This in Vedic astrology is also considered to be Rahu, and it is considered to be a malefic point. So we talked in Johnny's chart about his north node, his Rahu, in the 12th house in Cancer. Amber actually has it in the sign of Aries, the sign of Mars and war and belligerence, the sign of aggression, and it is so closely conjunct her sun. So in spite of the fact that she is a sun in Taurus with a north node in Aries at the critical anaretic 29th degree, which talks about a lot of chaos. Basically, 29th degree on Rahu, this talks about malevolent chaos bringing energy into the world. This is an energy that she cannot help herself but fall deeper and deeper into. I don't mean to bring her down. I don't mean to kind of like be very negative towards her, but it is significant to talk about the very difficult point of having Rahu in the sign of Aries, or Ares, the god of war, and also at the critical 29th degree, which any astrologer can tell you it's a chaos bringing aspect, and also conjunct her sun, so her identity, her ego, her sense of solar light, her solar consciousness. In addition to this, we also see there Mercury in Aries quite loosely conjunct this North Node in Aries. Well, this tells me that the area of growth in her life is learning to use her mind and her communications in ways in which they do not bring people down, but rather they build people up by making them laugh. Aries energy can be quite violent and aggressive, but it can also be incredibly charming, charismatic, creative, prone to all sorts of like lols moments and laugh out loud jokes. You know, these are individuals that can truly bring out the inner comedian. But we see how this energy in her chart is being downplayed at the moment by a need for her to assert her moral superiority over everything that has happened. Mercury in Aries also talks about being a little bit loose with the truth, because Aries just wants to win. It doesn't want to take into account the feelings of other people. So we see here very clearly that Amber's energy needs to grow in this incarnation towards building people up by inspiring them, by learning how to use her mind, by cracking jokes and becoming more of a person that can think for herself, a person that is able to express her identity and has a very distinct identity from the people in her life. It's further emphasized by the fact that when you have a North Node in Aries, you automatically have a South Node in Libra, and we see that her moon falls in the sign of Libra, the sign of beauty, the sign of relationships, communication, but also the lower vibration of Libra is codependency. So she is a person that doesn't like to be left alone. She hates being left alone with her own thoughts, with her own ideas. She needs constantly somebody that can feed some sort of energy back at her to illuminate her sense of being a woman, because the moon actually represents how we relax, our connection to our mother, but also in a woman's chart, the moon basically represents her. So she's very Libran. She is quite attractive. She's naturally into beauty, into pleasure. The downside of a moon in Libra conjunct the South Node is also the fact that she's an individual that has a very flat affect. This is not a person that, for example, feels a lot of things. This is an individual that really needs to work at developing her empathy, at learning how to move from one emotion to the other without appearing bipolar. And it's interesting because this word bipolar appeared in the diagnosis of, I think she is called Dr. Curry, the psychotherapist that was hired by Johnny Depp's legal team to discuss the results of the psychological evaluation. And the markers were bipolar personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder. Bipolar talks about flinching from one emotion to the other very quickly. You have a manic episode when you want to do a lot of things, and then you have a depressive episode when you just don't want to do anything. Your affect is low, you have no energy. And this speaks very clearly to the energy of her Libra moon. And that is her comfort zone as well. So she might one moment act in a certain way, and the next moment she completely changed her mind, and it looks almost as if she's a different person. So there is this energy of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde inherent within her, although potentially not to such a creepy degree as it was discussed in Robert Louis Stevenson novel. Then again, I don't know her personally, so we can only speculate. The other interesting marker that you see here is that she has a number of external outer planets in retrograde positions. We see here very clearly she has Pluto retrograde in the sign of Scorpio. She has Saturn retrograde in the sign of Sagittarius, conjunct Uranus, and Neptune retrograde. What do all of these retrograding planets in her natal chart tell us? That this is a lifetime in which Amber needs to learn to spend a lot of time focusing on who she is. She needs to do a fair amount of introspection. She needs to spend a lot of time away from other people, in solitude, reading, writing, learning, working that Mercury in Aries, that pioneer, fact-finding kind of energy, in order to find out more deeply who she really is, what she stands for, what her values are, apart from all of the relationships in her life. But this is clearly an individual that struggles to actually have the sense of independence, the sense of this is who I am, not by walking on the bodies of other people, but by truly being myself in a non-toxic way, in a non-codependent and parasitic kind of way. Because she did act a little bit like a parasite in this relationship to Johnny, which ended up draining him and depleting him of life force. And there were these toxic patterns that emerged between the two of them. Because as I said, Johnny is a man that really likes his freedom. Jupiter in Aries in the 9th house. This is a man that is emotionally attached to his work, not his home life. Moon in Capricorn in the 6th. This is a man that has a very good public image. Venus in Taurus in the 10th house. And this clashed phenomenally with Amber's placements. And I guess this triggered a lot of her own inner wounds of neglect and abandonment that she might have suffered from her own pretty nasty childhood, from what I could actually piece together from her account. So it seems as if they both triggered each other very deeply. This Pluto and Capricorn transit hasn't been at all easy for neither of them, but it tended to favor her because her sun is in Taurus, and Pluto trining her sun created a very harmonious energy that gave her a lot of power. So she actually climbed the social ladder by marrying Johnny. She got a lot of money in this process. She got a lot of prestige and acclaim, and to a certain extent she did make him look relatively good up until, well, proverbial shiz hit the fan, and everything that basically she has given him, she has taken away. Some people will call this classic narcissistic behavior. I would call this an astrological chart gone haywire. She's basically working with the lower energies of these placements, but to be honest, she hasn't been given such great placements. Another interesting marker in her chart is if you see her Venus is in the sign of Taurus and at the same, almost the same degree as Johnny Depp. But her Venus is colored differently because unlike Johnny, who has Venus conjunct Mercury, so the power of love and relationships and money in combination with the planet that rules him, Mercury, intelligent, fast thinking, communicative energy. No, Amber actually has Venus conjunct Lilith, the asteroid that represents wild, untapped feminine energy. Lilith was the first wife of Adam in the Bible. She was the one that refused to be subjugated to his idea of domestic life. So she basically walked out of that relationship in order to walk into the desert and copulate with beasts. Basically, this is how she's described in the Bible. Since then, a lot of feminist writers have taken that interpretation of Lilith and have said that this is just a man's way of interpreting a very independent woman that chose freedom over domestic bondage. So there are a variety of different views and ways in which you can see Lilith, but as an astrologer, whenever I see Lilith, I think of two things. I think of you cannot control this woman, and I think of wild sexual energy. So one way in which Amber basically gave to this relationship or kept Johnny locked plutonically into this relationship was through sex. Yeah, I'm sure that whatever she delivered in the bedroom was top notch. to such an extent that it made Johnny completely disregard all of the other red flags in their personal connection. So Venus conjunct Lilith cannot be tamed. I don't understand why she actually wanted to get married, or what was her purpose. It could potentially be money. She might have needed some money, because as you see, guys, in the chart, Moon in Libra conjunct South Node, she struggles to be independent. So part of the reason might not have only been money, but it could also be the need for companionship. But this need for companionship that she brought with her from a past life needs to be completely abandoned in this reality, because her destiny is to become increasingly independent, increasingly her own woman, increasingly militant, and actually her destiny is to become pretty much hated by other people, not so well loved, not so well liked. When you have a North Node in Aries, you need to get comfortable with other people not really enjoying everything that you have to say, because a South Node in Libra tends to be the people pleaser, the person that other people tend to walk all over, because it's like you're never going to rebel, you're always going to do what I tell you. So there has been in her this force of wanting to break free and break out, and wanting to become independent, and wanting to kind of like be militant. The problem is that instead of using this energy to actually say to Johnny, look, this relationship is not working out, I'm really sorry, I'm going to take my Venus in Taurus conjunct Lilith and my North Node in Aries conjunct my Sun, and I'm just going to walk away and let you be, and this is it. This didn't happen. This didn't happen because I feel here that her South Node kept dragging her back. Her South Node and her Moon are in a harmonious aspect to Johnny's Sun. So I feel that she constantly felt the need to go and talk to him. In addition to this, their Venuses in Taurus being at such a buddy-buddy friendly degree and being very similar, showed me that began as having a very good and supportive friendship, which then turned sexual, and it turned controlling, and it turned plutonic. At first glance, when you open up Amber's chart, you might be thinking, what is so terrible about this person? But if you have a detailed look, not only at the planets that I just mentioned, and you take a look at the asteroids, you take a look at the North Node, you also have a very good look at the aspects that certain planets are making in her chart. You actually get to the bottom of why is she the way that she is? Why does she come across as kind of like such a negative, malevolent energy? Why is she blatantly lying to a lot of people without kind of having this sense of self-awareness? Well, it's because of the positions I just mentioned. North Node in Aries at the critical anaretic chaos bringing degree of 29. We also see their Venus conjunct Lilith, wild feminine untapped energy. But she also has T-squares. She has 2 T-squares in her chart. The first T-square in her chart introduces the planets Jupiter, Chiron, and Saturn. And this talks about needing to work through wounds that were implemented in her life because she somehow defended herself, her morality, and her identity by learning how to lie. This is something that might have happened to her very early on. She has a Jupiter in Pisces, which by itself is a gorgeous, gorgeous, giving, self-sacrificing, empathetic energy. But this Jupiter in Pisces is tightly squaring Saturn in Sagittarius. Saturn in Sagittarius talks about certain blocks and limitations to her capacity to tell the truth. The higher vibration of Saturn in Sagittarius talks about a person that is constantly curious, a person that constantly wants to explore, wants to learn new things, wants to develop their skills, but she's underutilizing this energy, and it is playing out at the moment in lies, fibbing, a complete detachment from reality. Jupiter exaggerates whatever it touches. When it is in a tight square with Saturn, it brings about this problem with exaggerating the truth, exaggerating reality to the point where it becomes comical. It becomes a sketch of reality itself. And we saw this energy, how strongly it played out in her deposition on stand. In addition to this, because Chiron, the asteroid of wounded healing, is involved in this T-square between Jupiter and Saturn, we see here that this is causing her a lot of pain. But what is causing her pain? It's not necessarily that other people are lying to her, but it's the lies and the exaggerations that she is creating for herself that are bringing about this constant pain process of needing to find out what is the truth, who can I trust, what do I believe in. Now, Amber's second T-square involves the planets Neptune, Mars, Mercury, and the Moon. So again, we see pressure on her capacity to communicate, on her capacity to represent herself and her willpower. In addition to this, she has a pretty explosive aspect, Moon square Mars. And this Mars is also conjunct Neptune. When you have Mars conjunct Neptune, one of those aspects you don't want to see in the chart of your boyfriend or girlfriend or your spouse, because it's usually the cheating aspect. This is a person whose actions have something on the down low, a person who hides a lot of their actions, a lot of the ways in which they try to go about the world to reinstate their ego and their willpower and sexual energy happens behind closed doors in hush-hush environments. It is usually something that is covert and not known. So you can imagine that when you have the planet of sexuality, willpower, and ambition, Mars, in conjunction with the planets of secrets, disappointments, and also illusions, it talks about a lot of bed pleasures that are hidden from the eyes of the partner. And I can tell you guys, because I was married to a person that had the same aspect, I found out only towards the end of our marriage the number of people that he has cheated me with. It was completely shocking, and it was such a blow to my self-esteem to find out all of those things. So this is an individual that can hide a lot of the people that she might have had sex with. I don't think we know the extent of this. In addition to this, she has a very explosive aspect, Moon square Mars. This talks about an individual that is so easily triggered by things that happen in their life. So it could have been that maybe something happened to her and she, completely explodes on an individual and then apologizes and kind of calms down, because Mars is usually this kind of energy that is very all of a sudden eruptive, and then it calms down as quickly as it started. It's not Pluto. Pluto is the build-up planet. It's like things add on and add on and add on, and then there's a volcanic eruption that completely destroys a relationship or somebody's life. But Mars is usually just like these bursts of action and bursts of energy that completely rattle her up emotionally. So this is an individual that really struggles to feel peaceful on the inside, and a lot of tiny everyday things could have really triggered her, because Mars is actually in a good sign in Capricorn, but Mars in Capricorn talks about the need to control, and Moon in Libra is a sign that feels comfortable when communicating, when relating, when being around other people. So you see how much Johnny, his energy of loving his freedom, wanting to go to work, he has a Moon in Capricorn in the 6th house, triggered her Mars conjunct Neptune in Capricorn, and that trigger that happened, although it could have been quite harmonious between the two of them, actually led to this very tense Moon in Libra explosion. So I see that she was indeed deeply triggered by his desire to walk away from conflict, to go to work, to focus on maybe his group of team workers, co-workers, the people like in his film crew, rather than to sit all the time to talk to her and be some sort of like parasitic attachment to her. She really needed somebody that would have hanged around with her 24/7, and unfortunately, because this guy Johnny has a lot of planets in these earth-loving, money-making, work-prone energies, he just simply didn't have time to do that. He didn't have the inclination to do that. I do see as well that their destinies are not really compatible. She is meant to become increasingly more independent and militant and actually quite angry as well, with a North Node in Aries. And he is meant as well to become more reclusive, protective, spiritual, homebody kind of energy, to spend less time working and more time resting, taking holidays, maybe even indulging in art or doing something poetic, relaxing on his beautiful island. They have been a very beautiful connection, because as you guys see, they share a number of earth placements that could have really kept them as a stable couple. But I think think that these earthy placements were especially brought into being due to the fact that Pluto in the earthy sign of Capricorn basically dished out this phenomenal karma between the two of them. And I do think that Amber somehow was a manifestation that needed to appear into Johnny's life in order to help him bring up to the surface a lot of childhood wounding that he experienced in connection with his mother, so that he can finally see it, stand up to it through this trial, and heal himself as a consequence of this. So it's true what a lot of people say out there on the web, that no matter what the verdict is going to be, Johnny has won. He has won the opprobrium of a number of other people. He has cleared himself. But the way I see it as a social psychologist and astrologer, I'm very proud of him that he actually fulfilled the strong requirement of his Saturn return in the 7th house in Aquarius, which is speak up for yourself. Show the world the misfit that you are. And don't be afraid, because they will not reject you. They will actually support you and love you for the misfit that you are. And I feel like crying as well. My Venus is in Aquarius and it's touching upon his Saturn in Aquarius, so maybe this is why. For me personally, it has been a very emotional experience watching this, because I too was in a connection with a Taurus Sun that was very imbalanced. He was also quite a rich person and I was poor, and we had a lot of like kind of toxic dynamics. So watching this trial brought back a number of my own personal difficult aspects that I experienced in connection with that man. Watching this trial was almost like watching my mom and my dad argue, because I grew up with a man that has a moon in Capricorn and he is also an ascendant in Leo. The only difference between my father and Johnny is the fact that my father is 1 year younger than Johnny and that he has a sun in Libra rather than a sun in Gemini. But my father married a woman who has an ascendant in Libra, a moon in Libra, and a sun in Gemini. So my parents, as I was growing up, they played out the energies that I could see very strongly represented in this trial. I saw the tension that was expressed between a very stoic, silent, darkly humored moon in Capricorn man who would rather punch walls when he's angry rather than to punch her, and the feistiness and self-righteousness and constant need for attention and codependent behavior of a woman that is a moon in Libra. So amberheard, just like my mother, a person that constantly needs some sort of companionship in her life to feel validated. Moral of the story, from an astrological perspective, I keep reinstating this. If you are together with somebody that has moon opposite your moon or moon square your moon, it's going to be very difficult to be together with each other. Don't marry somebody that has moon square your moon. Get somebody that has moon conjunct your moon, moon trine your moon, moon sextile your moon. Incompatible moons lead to divorce, separation, and drama. Another thing I would say, Johnny could have been so much happier with a member of his own generation, of Pluto and Virgo. There are so many good quality women of the same age as Johnny. Why did he have to go for somebody that could have been his daughter? How was this trial for you guys? Let me know down in the comments. Did you experience some sort of healing and some sort of catharsis as you were watching the trial? Or was it just some sort of entertainment for you guys? You watched the trial in combination with 2 other individuals here on YouTube, the channel of Emily D. Baker and the channel of Asmongold. They are both such different individuals. Emily has extensive knowledge of the legal system because she worked as a prosecutor for a variety of years. And Asmon has this really sweet hillbilly kind of vibe about him. He made me laugh so much through the trial. So make sure to check them out, Asmongold and Emily D. Baker. And let me know, guys, what did you think of this trial? What do you think the verdict is going to be? I am all for him getting justice, in spite of the fact that they both were verbally abusive in this connection, in spite of the fact that they are both equally flawed individuals. She has been consistently lying about the physical abuse, and this is why I would like to see Johnny get justice in court. Okay, that's what I had for you. It's been quite a big clip, quite extensive. I hope you have enjoyed it. Make sure to like this video, dislike it as well if you haven't enjoyed it, and subscribe. Hit that button now, okay? Welcome yourself in my family. Until next time, I'm sending you lots of light and lots of love. Mwah.